Hi, my name is Sam, and I'm the executive pastor at 10th Church here in Vancouver, British Columbia. And in my role as executive pastor, I functionally act as the chief operating officer, run the church, manage the staff, implement the vision of the senior pastor. And so it's an exciting job. Also, at this point, oversee our different sites. 10th is an interesting church in that it's an incredibly multicultural church. We've got about 40 or so different ethnic backgrounds represented, a lot of different languages, very significant Asian influence here at 10th. And so that has definitely changed over the last 15 or so years. About 15 years ago, the church was about 100, 125, mostly Anglo, older people. And in the last 15 years, the church has grown to almost about 2,000, and now we've got 2 sites and launching a 3rd site in the fall, in October. We also have a unique situation. We have another service we call the 3rd service, and we're actually looking at that as an additional site as well. Even though it meets at our main facility, it's really a separate congregation with a separate staff, and so functionally we're looking at 4 different sites here. And 10th has also been instrumental in kind of launching and planting many of the churches in the lower mainland of the Vancouver, British Columbia area. And so is really one of those kind of anchor churches among our denomination here in British Columbia.
Thanks, Sam. Today we're talking a little bit about leadership development, and moving from a church of 100 to 2,000, you've had to develop a lot of leaders. And the last little while, there's been a stronger focus on leadership development. Tell us a little bit about what you're focusing on in that area at 10th.
Yeah, I think our primary focus has been on getting all of the staff on board, which has not been a really easy task necessarily, although it has been accomplished and people are talking about it more. It's much more in our consciousness. We've taken time in our staff meetings during our staff development time to really kind of roll out and explain about what we call our leadership pipeline, and the expectation that every staff member is actively involved in apprenticing people in their particular ministry area or their ministry team. In our leadership pipeline, we've identified 5 different levels of leadership, and so we periodically ask staff to kind of report in on who's at the apprentice level, who's at the leader level, who's at the director level, and such. And so the leadership pipeline is really the heart and soul of our leadership development program here at 10th. And then from the leadership pipeline, we kind of feed people into a couple of programs that are leadership development programs. The first one is a year-long program called the Foundations of Leadership. And it does exactly what the name says. It really provides people with a foundation for what it means to be a leader, particularly in the context of the church, but also in the marketplace as they just exercise their avocation wherever it is. And so once we get people through the Foundations program, there's a 2nd year that we launched this year, and we're in the kind of the 3rd module of that right now, and that's called the Soul of Leadership. And the only way a person can get into the Soul of Leadership program is by graduating from the Foundations program or being recommended by one of our pastoral staff members from their leadership pipeline. They feel like they've got a significant foundation already. We interview them, and if we assess that is the case, then we welcome them into Soul, which only takes 20 people a year. Our Foundations program has about 45, sometimes up to 50 people a year. And so it's kind of a funnel that we kind of funnel people through. Foundations would be at the top of the funnel. Soul would be kind of towards the middle, and we're in the process, once we refine Soul, to add a 3rd final kind of level to our leadership development program. So those are some of the core things we do. I would say another important element of our leadership development program is we have built the accountability for leadership development into our review process. So this last year, for the first time, we actually added a section on our review where we're reviewing our staff on how well they're apprenticing people and keeping people in their leadership pipeline, which impacts their overall kind of grading on their evaluation, their annual evaluation. Also, we built it into our weekly staff report. So now every week when they fill out their staff report, one of the kind of areas that they fill out is, what have you done this last week in terms of managing and developing your leadership pipeline? And so they need to report in on a weekly basis. So we felt like if this was really a high value, we needed to build it into our accountability systems as well. And so that has definitely gotten people's attention. And so we're seeing that start to take place as well. Also, in our regular staff meetings, once or twice a quarter, we devote an hour and a half of our staff development time to our leadership pipeline and continue to train our staff on, techniques and what it means to apprentice people and how do you do that, how do you identify new apprentices. And so it's still a work in progress. We're still fine-tuning things, but those are kind of some of the core things that we do right now in leadership development.
Sam, tell us a little bit on how that's worked with the staff. You've talked about a real focus on getting the staff on board, holding them accountable, measuring. What are some of the results or progress you're seeing as a result of that sort of emphasis with the staff?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've seen is that we've tried to start using a specific language around leadership development. And so one of the very encouraging signs is we hear staff constantly talking now about their pipeline, about their apprentices. So we're trying to create a common language and keep that alive and talk about the same thing using the same terms over and over. So I think we're seeing staff beginning to adapt and adopt to this new language, which is an encouraging sign. I think one of the challenges that we face is it's one thing to kind of see it as, yes, we need to be apprenticing and developing leaders, but I think when it comes to hiring new staff, we still need to convince some of our staff that we are really committed to hiring from within. So it's one thing to have a leadership development pipeline, and yes, I'm kind of mentoring and apprenticing people, but then when it comes to hiring an actual staff person, the fallback still seems to be kind of, well, we might hire from outside instead of really maybe giving more serious consideration to some of the folks that really are qualified and could. So, for example, we just had a recent case where one of our sites, our site pastor, is hiring a new pastor of missional engagement. And the two final candidates were one from internal who had gone through foundations and who is now mentoring other people at foundations and is, I think, really shown a lot of progress, and who is considering going into ministry, kind of as a vocation. And then we had someone else who was a Regent college graduate who came from the outside with no experience of our church. And ultimately, the site pastor chose the outsider, even though I really admonished and said, this is something that we really value and we need to really hold this high. They still felt like this person had a better theological grounding. And our philosophy is we're making our site pastors responsible to manage their own staff. And so kind of decentralizing that. So, I just told them, well, ultimately it's going to be your decision, but you're also going to be responsible for the decision. If they don't resonate with our DNA and our culture and our ethos, that's going to be your responsibility. So I think that's still a job that we need to continue, that our first impulse is always to hire from within. And if we just don't have any really viable candidates, then we look outside. So it's still a work in progress.
That's great. You also talked about some of the one-year sort of more internship type programs, the 2 years that you have run. Where have you seen the benefit to the church is having these two different foundation courses that you run?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've seen is the people that kind of get accepted into those programs really take it seriously and really feel like they've been admitted to something that really has a purpose. When they enter into foundations, for example, before they get accepted to the program, one of the questions they're asked, in the application is, what do you hope to do with the leadership skills and knowledge that you develop? How do you want to use that here at 10th? And so we actually ask them to kind of hone in on a ministry area that they're passionate about, that they will begin volunteering in and helping to provide some, lower level leadership in. And so that's, I think, one of the benefits is we're seeing people start to think about, gee, where will I serve? How will I do that? Also in foundations, they have to do kind of a practicum. So as a part of the foundation's program, they actually have to become involved in a ministry and kind of engage in a project over the course of that year. And so we've seen some people actually get excited, and it's kind of helped launch a couple of new ministries that people have gotten excited about as a result of the leadership development program they've been in.
Give us a couple of examples of practical projects that students had to work in when they're in their foundation's year.
Yeah, so for example, one person got involved and said, I've noticed that here at 10th we don't have a lot of focus on creation care or kind of ministries focused around creation care, environment, that kind of thing. And so they kind of made their project over the years, starting kind of a community garden and giving leadership to that and recruiting other people to be a part of the creation care team. So we actually now have a creation care team at 10th that kind of spans all of our campuses. And as a part of that, they got excited about what's called Good Seed Sunday. And now that's kind of becoming an annual thing here at 10th. This year is the second year on April 30th that we'll be celebrating Good Seed Sunday. And so that's really been an outgrowth of people's participation in foundations. We've also seen, particularly in the worship arts area, a lot of our worship leaders have been apprenticed, by our pastors and have been recommended to foundations. And so we've seen some real growth particularly in their speaking, how they think about leading worship. It's not just music, but they're seeing it a little bit more holistically. So those have been a couple of the benefits that we've seen so far.
That's great. And you talked about the second course that you started, which was on the soul of the leader. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the Soul of Leadership really addresses exactly what the title says. We really kind of delve into the inner life issues involved in leadership, and we help people kind of understand the journey they've been on and maybe how God has been shaping them over time. And so they have to actually prepare kind of their life journey, a story. We call it their timeline, and then they have to share it with others and really share how they have seen God kind of processing them over time. And there's always a lot of kind of aha moments in that. They share that story in a retreat setting. And then we kind of go through issues of self-leadership, the whole concept that you really can't lead others until you've learned to lead yourself well. So if you can identify areas in your own life in need of change and then motivate yourself to make changes, what makes you think you can lead 20 or 200 people to change and to manage that process? So we talk about self-leadership as a foundation for effective leadership. And then the third module that we're in right now, we really kind of delve into the dark side of leadership and what are some of the unresolved or unidentified inner life issues, personality issues that can really be obstacles and roadblocks to effective leadership if you don't identify them and start working through them. And so that's kind of what the Soul of Leadership is about, is really focusing on the inner life. Because generally, leaders don't drop out of ministry for bad theology or even bad technique or skill. It's generally related to their inner life issues that the pressures of leadership kind of caused to rise to the surface. So,
yeah, it's interesting you've chosen to make a significant development in the life of existing leaders in those areas. And we're really looking at self-leadership and the soul of leadership at a more upper level, let's say, than an introductory level. So that's great. You talked about your dream of adding a third level to this. Tell us a little bit about what you're thinking about there.
Yeah, the third level we're thinking right now, we're kind of in the brainstorming and planning stages of that. It would be more focused on transformational leadership. So how do you now, as a leader who is giving attention to their own development, their own formation, how do you now actually bring about change? How do you start a ministry? How do you plan? How do you organize? How do you staff? How do you budget? And so what we're thinking here is this would be a smaller group yet, probably of maybe 6 to 10, and that maybe we divide them into 2 teams, and their charge would be to find an area they're passionate about that we don't have existing ministries or that we're not addressing well in the community, and actually researching that, and actually during the course of a year developing a ministry to meet that need. And so it would be a very hands-on, with maybe a once monthly lecture on an element of transformational leadership. And then now the rest of the other 3 weeks of this month, go out and actually start implementing this, come back, report in, how's it going? Here's another principle on transformational leadership. Now go implement that and kind of add to what you've already done. And over the course of the year then, helping them to actually identify a need, mobilize resources to meet that need, recruit people to help support the ministry that they've created, and then help engage them in how do we get that into the church budget? How do we make that a priority? Yeah.
And you've talked about your dream of beginning to hire from within rather than from without, and moving that pendulum so that you're primarily looking within. At what part of that 3-step process, or those 3 courses, would you look at people to be hiring from? Where's your pool to hire from?
Yeah, I think the pool kind of begins to form in the soul of leadership.
Which is your second level.
Yeah, and this is just the first year we've done soul, but one of the things we've seen, people that flourished in foundations, which is much more superficial, kind of different talks on foundational issues in leadership, they really love that. Once they get into soul, though, and they're required to do some very difficult inner work, we found a few people kind of starting to drop off, or like, and I think it's a lot of just inner resistance to going there. And so we're kind of starting to weed people out in the sense that, you know, they might have the skill set, they might have a lot of tangibles, but the intangibles of the inner life still are maybe not well formed, and to put them in leadership could probably be disastrous. And so I think the people that make it out of soul will be kind of that first pool. And then, so I think there will be potential, you know, staff members there. But then also, I think that third year where they're actually practicing and actually engaging, in that sense, they're already becoming leaders. My hope is, although it's unspoken and we wouldn't promote it this way, is that some of these people actually identify needs and begin ministries, and then actually end up creating a staff position for themselves as a result of that process.
Yeah. Sam, tell us a little bit about some of the books or resources or conferences or things that have been helpful in your formation of thinking about leadership development.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, one of the real foundational books for us as we've kind of rolled out this whole leadership development program concept with our staff has been Exponential. The book Exponential has been really helpful, helped us, you know, kind of develop language around this issue. We had the entire staff for one full quarter of our staff development time in our staff meetings, reading the book chapter by chapter and then discussing it. And then we had some teaching times kind of related to that around the concepts in Exponential, which is all about developing and expanding your leadership so that the church can grow exponentially. A very interesting book. I think another book that I've recently read that's really helped us in terms of establishing some staff team values that we're also building into our evaluation process is Boundaries for Leaders. I think that's, I think it's Henry Cloud and his boundary stuff. And so that's been a really helpful resource. We haven't taken the staff through that, although probably in an upcoming quarter of staff meetings, we're probably going to go through that and talk about team and the kind of boundaries that we establish through our values, determining what kind of behavior we allow and don't allow. And then I'd say one of the resources that was obviously just instrumental to us was the Leadership Network learning community that we were part of. That helped us over a 2-year period develop a lot of the models and the plans. I honestly don't think that we would be where we are today if it hadn't been for the Leadership Network experience that we had. So really can't recommend that highly enough.
That's great. Anything that I've missed that I should have asked you about 10th or leadership development there?
No, not really. I mean, I think one of the things that we have to continually refine is really kind of aligning our ministry opportunities in every department and every level, and kind of creating a menu of empty positions, or really identifying clearly volunteer roles that we could start plugging people into. As you start to get, I mean, between Soul and Foundations, we have 60 people going through leadership development. And we're seeing that we've really got to have a lot of kind of ready positions for volunteers to step into that we can offer them towards the end. So that's, I think, making sure that if you're going to be recruiting and equipping leaders, that there are plenty of opportunities then, so they don't get frustrated and said, I went through all of this and now what? You know, so that's one of the areas that we're kind of working on as well.
Great. Thanks so much.
Yeah.